joining. We really appreciate. We just wrapped up the last session, and we'll give people a little bit of time to dive into this next one. So, how's your day going so far?
Perfect.
Really good. Awesome. Well, you all know that we'll be diving into having multilingual stores and how it's now easier than ever. And I'm excited for you to share lots of great information with our audience. I know that, people have been really enjoying getting so much information in such a short period of time. I'm kind of amazed by how much the panelists and speakers are sharing in just 20 to 30 minute slots. So, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And to start this off, I would love you ladies to introduce yourselves. So first, Tawnee, if you could introduce yourself and a little bit about your company so that people can know why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Tawnee Steinke. I work at Zonos. Zonos is a software company, and we've built technology that is put in place to make it easier for businesses to take their products cross-border. So we do things around localizing to a customer, but also with duties and taxes and things like that. So with Zonos, I work on their partnership side. I'm over all of their partnerships with the businesses out there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And Laura, I'd love you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about the company you work with.
Yeah, of course. So hi. I'm Laura, and I'm originally from Colombia, but I live in France, in Paris. I'm head of sales at Weglot. So Weglot is a company helping you translate your store in less than 5 minutes. And we've been around for quite a few years, and we already are working with really big retail customers, like, for example, Steve Madden or Murad Skincare. We're working with very big sports companies, but we cannot name them because they're so big that we had to sign an agreement, so I'm not going to talk about them. And yeah, we are based in France. That's it.
Fantastic. So let's just dive right in. I mean, it seems very obvious, but can you share why is having it multilingual stores so important?
Yeah, of course. So basically, just to put it simple, if you don't understand what you see and what you're buying, you just won't buy it. So there's research backing that up. There was recently a localization research firm called Minzy Insights, which released a study, it was just this week, that 9 out of 10 users will ignore your product if it's not in their language. And this was done basically, the test store was an underwear store.
And I mean, it makes complete sense. And I would think that a lot of companies just kind of naturally, especially when they start in the US, just base it in English and think that, okay, well, many countries in many other countries speak English as well. But, you can't just assume that. And also, if there's not their native language, and I'm not surprised that there's research that kind of shows that it adds another barrier for them to make that decision to buy.
Exactly. So I can give you an example of myself. Like, I speak English pretty well. I've lived in many different countries. I lived in Brazil, in Finland, and in France. I have been very frustrated when I Google things in English to buy in my country, because I usually get sent to US pages for that. And usually those products are not available in my country. So now I only Google products in French, for example, living in France, because I know that they're going to be available for shipping in France. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I want to kind of shift into what are some of the top things that U.S. merchants need to know when it comes to breaking into the international market?
So one of the first things that I would want to share, and it's a very known one, but it's important, is cultural awareness. One of the big examples that are often used is the one of China. Chinese people are very, very different from Americans. They have different traditions. They have different cultural codes. And you have a lot of brands who are going after that market, but don't really understand it so well. For example, now you have some luxury brands that have started launching Chinese New Year campaigns. And some of them have gotten it very right, because they have gotten some assistance from Chinese marketers, and they have listened to them, and some have gotten it very wrong. So it's super important to be culturally aware of the markets that you're going to, and what they're expecting, what they like, what they celebrate. In the States, you have a lot of national holidays that you sometimes use for sales. It would be nice if you actually do that also for the countries that you're going to. So for example, Chinese New Year, For example, here in France, we have Bastille Day, which is coming soon. That can also be used so that it shows that you're actually culturally aware. A second one is that you should know that your revenue is going to explode if you localize. So, for example, one of our customers, we have a customer story of a customer that makes eyeglasses. They launched their site and they increased their sales by 6 times internationally, and they improved their traffic by 70%. So it is a fact that you will get more sales from launching internationally. And then you have the SEO. So basically, if your site is not translated, and if you don't translate also your metadata, you won't get found. You won't be found by your local customers. One other thing that you need to be aware of is that as you are doing keyword research in English to be found, you also need to do it in the local markets that you're going to. It's not because you have something and you have it translated that it means that people are going to find you, because they might be looking for that same product in a different way than it is translated literally. So maybe you would hire an agency to help you with keyword research. Those are the things from me. I don't know, Tawnee, if you want to add something on that.
Yeah, I think definitely your customer's experience is so important. Some of the other things that you'll need to know about doing international, though, is I think, and this is on Zonos side, but knowing what the cost is going to be for you and your customer, setting that expectation up front as well, can really decide whether that customer is going to come back to you in the future or not. And localizing to them, in my opinion, is one of the most important reasons. We all buy online because it's easy and we expect to get a certain experience. So make sure your shoppers in other countries see that as well.
Definitely. And I would love to hear from, when people are making the decision to expand beyond their country, expand, say, beyond the US, what are some things that they need to do, what they need to have in their initial launch before they actually, pull the plug and make it happen?
Yeah, so on our side, this is kind of a big question, right? There's a lot of things to know when going international, but I'm going to tell you guys my 2 most important things. So number 1, which I've already kind of touched on a little bit, but is cost. What is the cost going to be for you as a business owner? And what is the cost going to be for your international customer to receive your product? And that includes shipping. It includes any of those import fees, currency exchange, all of that, right? So knowing what it's going to cost you, and shipping to me is the hardest part. I'm a business owner myself. I have an e-commerce site, and honestly, shipping is the most overwhelming part, because as consumers today, we expect a product to be delivered to my house today, right? I order, I expect it right now, and I expect to pay nothing. Well, that's not really the case for these business owners. So knowing what it's going to take for you to get your product into that country is number 1. And number 2, like Laura and I had talked on the last one, to me, it's all about customer experience. So in my initial launch, I would want to make sure, what countries am I going to? What should the experience for my shopper be? And have I done that for them? Have I set the right expectations for them? I think that's the most important thing. But Laura, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, the point that you mentioned on the shipping, it's essential when you launch your online shop internationally. When it comes to localization, you should have a translated site and translated. So you should have multilingual SEO covered, because you want to be found. You want to sell. You don't want to launch your website and have no one find you and then flop on sales side. So it's super important that you have that covered. However, I would say that to maximize return on investment, just make sure you don't spend way too much money on the localization side of things initially, because that can be improved later on. So just make sure that you have a translated website, that you have your multilingual SEO covered, and that you have shipping already taken care of. That's the main one.
Definitely. You touched on this, Laura, but there are things that can be done later on by market testing and things like that, and you seeing what what's working in the launch, just kind of get things out there like site translation you touched on, understanding the logistics and costs for your products to be shipped and to be delivered and things like that. And understanding to make sure that the user experience is great. So what are some things that can be done later on, things that people need to be look out for doing, testing or, just kind of gathering data to know what the next step should be?
So on the localization side of things, one thing that you can do is, for example, translate images. That's super important because images are also a big part of your site. So that you make sure that, for example, either you translate the text that is there or that you localize the image to your market. Another example, again, I'm going to talk about China, but in China, people are more used to having more colorful images, much more saturated. So that's a little bit something that you should consider. You don't want to use all the same images in every market. Another one is something that you can improve is localization. So product names, do some A/B testing on what works best if you change product descriptions for your SEO as well, which products are selling better, if you can improve something on those products on the localization side of things. And also another thing is that maybe you can consider different payment options per country. So some countries are more used to paying, for example, with PayPal, whereas others are going to be using, for example, you have in China, you have the WeChat payment. So you just need to consider those things according to the locales that you're going to.
Definitely. I think it's important too of the language and different words, like you mentioned, because there are some phrases that in English might seem appropriate, right? But then translated other words, other countries may seem like very, like to even completely inappropriate that, you just miss and don't realize. So doing is incredibly important. And I'd love to hear from you, Tawnee, like what are some things you recommend for people to implement after the initial launch?
Yeah, so when you break into international and you start doing research, you can get overwhelmed really easily. So I just want to say this, which I like to give this advice to everyone. The first step is to actually do it. Just get started and then improve your process as you go along. And one of my favorite things to do, even here at Zonos, is check in with my current customers, talk to them, find out what type of experience did they have with your company, what did they like, what did they dislike, and then you can start to see where in your process you could make adjustments to make international more user-friendly for them. As far as for your business yourself, I talk with merchants all day long, and I usually hear the same thing from them when it comes to international, which is international is a smaller percentage of my business, but it's 80% of my headaches because I don't have the right partners or tools or processes put in place on the back end that they're having to spend more time on that. So I would recommend that you look at your process of, completing and fulfilling that order. What does that look like? Where are you spending time and how can you help improve that? Whether it's with technology or partners, there's a lot of options out there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And you touched on this, so like checking in with your current buyers and things like that. So from you two, what would you say is the overall international buyer experience? And it's completely different from someone in the US buying from a vendor in the US. It's completely different from someone, say, in France or Portugal or Nigeria or China buying something from the US. I'd love to hear, shed some light on what that buyer experience typically is like.
Yeah, so here in the US, we're really, really spoiled. We get onto websites. We don't even sometimes know that there's international sites out there. We add items to our cart. We usually have our payment options loaded. We pay however we want to. All of a sudden, the package shows up at our door and we get our product, right? It's easy. That's why we buy. Well, international shoppers, it is not that same experience for them. Kind of like Laura had mentioned, when she went to Google, she found all these sites that those products don't even ship to her country. So the first thing is they get onto a website and they have no idea, unless you are somewhat either showing in their language or messaging to them, they have no idea whether you ship international or not. So they'll have to try to either look at like your shipping policy, maybe your FAQs, or they go to checkout, they try to select their country, and right there they find out yes or no. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, okay, what do you do, right? They don't know what the full cost is gonna be. It's a different currency. They get surprised. Well, a lot of times they can't pay shipping online because it's hard to calculate. And then they have the merchant contact them with the shipping amounts. So let's say that they get through the whole process and they paid for the product. Well, now getting the product to them, they have someone come to their door like UPS or FedEx or DHL, and at that point they find out, hey, you also have to pay import fees and it's this amount. So it's really difficult to buy from a US site, although there is a lot of need for it and customers want to buy from US retailers, right? So making that experience easier is really what is a game changer in growing your international.
I mean, you touched on it. There's so many things that that us in the U.S. don't really know that other countries have or international buyers experience. I mean, there's landing costs, there's taxes, shipping, other costs. I'd love to hear what are some other things that we should just be aware, just so that way we don't to reduce those challenges, or for that international buyer getting that you don't want to have someone going through experience where they buy this product and then they end up getting frustrated and pulling their hair out because they realize that, okay, what product seemed like it was a smaller cost turns into this big thing. And then now in the end, they wish they didn't buy it in the first place. So what are some things that we as US-based companies need to be aware of, so that way we can help buyers know about those costs before actually making the purchase?
Yeah, so landed cost is really complicated. It includes not only your product and that shipping, but those duties, taxes, and any fees that can be included. So for a lot of companies, they have no idea what the amount is going to be, and they think, oh, well, the international shopper should know because it's their country that charges those fees, right? Well, not really the case. Even doing landed cost for 10 years at Zonos, we still sometimes find out things that we're like, really, that's a rule? But every country charges different amounts depending on where it's coming from, depending on what your product is. So it's really hard to be able to calculate. But just know that what goes into it is taxes. So every country has a tax, which is pretty simple to Google. If you're going to the UK, you can Google, and I think their rate's around 21 to 23%. So knowing what that tax is going to be. We also charge duty on a product, which is based off of what the product is, and that percentage is anywhere from 6 to 10% on average. But then the carrier also charges fees. So somebody has to take that package to customs and do all the paperwork and all of that. And so they're going to charge you a fee to do that. So when that package passes through, you can't just think, oh, if I charge tax to my customers, that's all they're going to have to pay, because that's not the case. There's a lot of additional fees that can go into it. Zonos, we have a website that breaks down exactly what goes into a landed cost in a blog and all of that, because it's really, really complicated. But I think the most important part is being transparent with your customers about either, hey, here's our partner and here's the amount, or just letting your customer know your duties, there will be import fees due at time of delivery. And that way they're not being surprised by thinking they've paid it all. One of the problems with e-commerce sites today is in the tax bill, because the US is so easy, every state has its own tax, we can put in a tax. Well, that's not the case with international. And so a lot of times in the tax bill, it'll show $0. And that's where it gets really confusing to customers, is they're like, hey, you guys said $0, but really that's not the case, because taxes are charged differently and a lot more goes into that bill than what we have here in the US. So if you ever want to know more about it, like I say, Zonos has a great blog that talks about and breaks it down. But the important thing is letting your customer know, and you being aware yourself that they're going to be due, or something, the amount for it.
Could you type in the URL for the Zonos blog so that people can come and find that? And while you're doing that, Laura, I'd love to hear from, obviously, I would think that you've made purchases from the US before and from another country, right?
I have horrible stories of shopping, like
before
before
your experience, people can get your perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, I used to live in Finland, and I did a shop for some things from Victoria's Secret before they had their EU site, and I ordered. And then Finnish tax authorities contacted me, and they said, you owe us $120 in taxes. But I had paid $60 in Victoria's Secret stuff. And now it was too late, because then they said that if you don't pay, we're going to bill you more, and it was going to go into tax collection. So I had to pay, but then I ended up paying like $200 or $300 extra. Now they launched the EU site, and now you can buy easily things here. But that's a really horrible experience that I remember when it wasn't available here. Now, when it comes to transparency, that's a really important point. So one thing that you should take into account also within the whole buyer experience is basically the reviews. So the reviews should be in the user's language, because reviews are super, super important for any online store, as they create trust and they allow transparency as well. And also, like, all the notifications that they get for the order, for the shipping, make sure also that you give them localized links to the shipping. For example, if it's DHL has, for example, French site, they have a German site. You just need to make sure that that whole experience is taken care of and is understood by your client. So yeah, for example, at Weglot, we allow you to translate your reviews. We allow you to translate that whole experience, because we have thought that truly, like, it's not only your website, it's everything, the checkout, the notifications, the reviews, everything.
Definitely, and this all comes through for the overall user experience. You want people to have good impression for you. You want it to be easy for people to buy. And it makes sense that companies tend to be super easy to buy naturally from their native, the people, they understand it, but we want to make it that easier experience when you go expansive, because then you don't want to have someone go through like what you did, Laura, of just painful experience, expensive experience. And just, I'm sure that when you finally received the products, you probably didn't enjoy them as much as you would have if you didn't go through that whole process.
And you cannot exchange it anymore. So what can you do?
Yeah. It's terrible. And I want to encourage anyone watching, if you have any questions, please chime them into the chat box, because, Tawnee and Laura are wealth of information. And while people are thinking of things they might want to ask, but I want to hear first, Tawnee, can you share, like, if there's only one thing that people can take away from your side of this information, what's that?
That's a really hard question. I'm going to add so much answers, just because if you are a business that has never done international, I think what you should take away would be different than someone who's already doing it. So I already said with someone doing international, I think the first step is to just jump in and do it. But to do that, you need to know your customer and decide where products that, where are your products needed and where you should start your process. So maybe pick your top 5 countries, and again, just go and do it. That's the most important part. For somebody who has already started and they have probably run into a lot of issues and probably spent a lot of money on it, my top advice would be for you is to really focus on ways that you can, how you like to be treated as a customer, and are you doing that same thing for your international shoppers? With social media today, you guys talk about reviews. It's so important that we have a great experience, because I almost only buy based off of the reviews that I have. So setting that up where you are upfront, they know the cost, it's localized to them. To me, that's going to be the thing that's going to help you the most grow, and not only grow the business, but keep that lifetime value of your customer high and keep them coming back for more.
Definitely, and make it easier for them to want to refer to their friends regardless of where they are.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear from you, Laura. What's something that you really want to stress to people joining us?
Yeah, so just understanding that people will look for the product in their own language. So it's super important that your store is in their language, because you're personalizing it for them, the whole experience. That's really important. And also, like, having a multilingual store is super easy nowadays. It used to be very, very difficult in the past. You had to copy paste, you had to duplicate the site. You didn't understand really how to do multilingual SEO. now you can just do it super quickly. Like with us, you can do it in less than 5 minutes. You have automatic translation that you can improve later on. You can invite your reviewers. You can have professional translations on the side, but you can do this as you go. So as Tawnee said, just go, just do it. Take the jump, launch it. You'll get lots of returns. For every dollar that you spend on localization, you get $25 in return. So you will sell, and that's something that you should know. So it's just important to do it. Just launch it. Multilingual.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, ladies. We really, really appreciate it. And for anyone who wants to connect with them more, learn more about what Zonos and Weglot offer, please go to the expo area so you can connect with them more, learn about the services, learn about the information they have, because they have a lot. And with hearing all this information, we learned so much, but then I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about like, wow, this is a lot of work. I might want to work with an expert team or a service. That's when you want to go in that booth and connect, because then you can get the help you need and probably save you a lot of headaches in the future. So thank you so much for sharing this wealth of information, ladies. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
I will see you all in the next session. We are coming up with why centralized product feed management is table stakes in 2020. So I will see you in the next session. Thank you.
Bye.